Take a deep breath. Let the noise of the day fade away. You're safe here now, wrapped in the quiet stillness of night. Welcome to the Griot Chronicles, where history whispers through shadows and art comes alive in the dark. Tonight, we're telling a bedtime story like no other, one filled with mystery, beauty, and the bizarre. These are the top 10 strange paintings, works so peculiar, so haunting, they almost feel like dreams, or perhaps something else entirely. So pour yourself some tea or some warm chocolate drink, nestle deep into your blanket, and let the strange world of art gently pull you into its curious spell. In the dim glow of the Prado Museum in Madrid hangs a painting that has mystified, mesmerized, and even disturbed its viewers for over 500 years. It is vast, it is vivid, it is utterly unhinged. The Garden of Earthly Delights, by the elusive Dutch master Hieronymus Bosch, is not just a painting, it's a portal into the fevered psyche of the early Renaissance, a place where the boundaries between the divine and the damned are smeared by wild imagination, sacred terror, and a giddy, grotesque sense of beauty. Created sometime between 1490 and 1510, the Garden of Earthly Delights is a triptych, 3 panels joined together like a story unfolding in divine sequence. When the wings are closed, a grey monochrome image of the earth on the 3rd day of creation appears, an orb shrouded in glass, suspended in the void, watched over by a tiny figure of God in the upper left. There is silence, anticipation. It is the calm before a cataclysm. Open the panels and chaos explodes across the canvas. The left wing, serene yet strange, shows the Garden of Eden. God, depicted with Christ-like features, presents Eve to Adam in a landscape lush with impossible life. Giraffes, unicorns, elephants, and birds with human expressions. It's paradise, yes, but there's a tension beneath the surface. The animals are not quite right. The trees are twisted. There is an eerie stillness, as if the painting knows what's coming. Then comes the central panel, the Garden of Earthly Delights proper. It is a sprawling panorama of carnal abandon. Hundreds of nude figures, men and women, frolic in a landscape bursting with oversized fruit, bizarre structures, and surreal beasts. They ride giant birds. They climb inside giant strawberries. They bathe in pools surrounded by naked bodies and fantastical animals. There's no shame, no sin, only pure indulgence. It is perhaps a vision of mankind before the fall, an experiment in what the world might look like if innocence and lust danced in harmony. But Bosch's message is ambiguous. Is this paradise or a prelude to damnation? The answer lies in the final panel. To the right, the dream dissolves into nightmare. Here is hell, Bosch's most infamous contribution to art history. This is no fire and brimstone cliché. This is musical hell, a symphony of torment. Naked sinners are consumed, mutilated, and tortured by demonic creatures. A man is devoured by a frog-like beast. Another's head becomes a drum for a devil. A broken lute and a pierced harp hint that music, once a source of joy, has become an instrument of agony. And then there is the infamous Tree Man, a half-human, half-egg figure with legs of boats and a hollowed-out torso housing sinners drinking in a tavern. His haunted face stares directly at the viewer, as if aware of our voyeurism, as if warning us, this could be you. What was Bosch trying to say with all of this? Scholars are divided. Some believe it's a moral warning, a depiction of the inevitable fall of mankind if it indulges in earthly pleasures. Others see it as a satire, mocking the absurdities of a world obsessed with desire. And then there are those who insist it is a deeply mystical, perhaps even heretical vision, a coded map of alchemical transformation, spiritual madness, and divine retribution. But Bosch never explained. He left no writings, no notes, just this monstrous, miraculous painting, a visual riddle that continues to defy logic and delight the imagination. In a world where medieval art was supposed to be pious, restrained, and didactic, Bosch gave us a universe that was wild, wicked, and wonderfully unhinged. The Garden of Earthly Delights is not just a painting, it is an experience, a psychedelic scroll of human nature, rolled open in paint and nightmare. And centuries later, it still asks us the same question: what is pleasure worth when hell is watching? In the dim, candlelit corridors of 17th century Spain, where religious iconography reigned and noble portraits echoed status and grace, one painting emerged like a thunderclap, shocking, raw, and impossible to ignore. Giuseppe de Ribera's Magdalena Ventura, with her husband and son, completed in 1631, does not soothe the eye, it assaults it. Standing tall in a stark, monastic setting, Magdalena Ventura is no ordinary woman. She is bearded, full-bearded, not with faint wisps or hidden strands, but with the kind of thick, coarse facial hair that one might expect to find on a sailor or a monk. Yet she wears no disguise. She does not shy from the canvas. She stares directly into the viewer's soul, her eyes fierce with dignity, daring you to look away. Commissioned by the Duke of Alcala, a Spanish nobleman and avid collector of the bizarre, this painting was meant not to flatter, but to record, like a specimen under glass. Magdalena, by then in her 50s, had reportedly begun growing facial hair only after the birth of her first child, a phenomenon that would today suggest a hormonal imbalance like hirsutism or polycystic ovary syndrome. But in her time, she was a living curiosity, a bearded woman whose presence stirred awe and unease in equal measure. The composition is stark and deliberate. She cradles her swaddled infant in her arms, a gesture of maternal warmth, and yet her towering, almost statuesque figure dwarfs the other figures in the room. Her husband stands to the side, diminished both physically and symbolically, his eyes cast downward, his posture deferential. He is not the anchor of the family, she is. Her son, small and barely seen within the tightly wrapped cloth, seems almost like an extension of her body, not separate but absorbed. Behind them, carved into stone tablets on either side, are lengthy Latin inscriptions, one explaining her origin, the other her condition. These texts turn her into both subject and object, person and oddity. Ribera, ever the realist, paints without embellishment or mercy. The skin is coarse, the hands are aged, the eyes are dark with memory. He does not beautify her, he dignifies her. There is no background flourish, no ornamental drapery or softening landscape. Instead, the background is cold stone, amplifying the severity of the moment. It is as if Magdalena herself has been chiseled from the same material, unyielding, eternal. What this painting captures is not deformity, but defiance. In an age where women were confined by beauty standards, domesticity, and silence, Magdalena Ventura stands like a mountain, unapologetically herself. This was not a sideshow exhibit, not a grotesque parody. This was a chronicle of existence that dared to question the borders between male and female, strength and submission, the seen and the unseen. It is both a work of radical empathy and ruthless observation. Magdalena Ventura, with her husband and son, is not just one of the strangest portraits ever painted. It is a rebellion in oils and canvas, a woman who refused invisibility, captured forever in the act of being completely, utterly seen. In the golden haze of the Northern Renaissance, where beauty was idealized and order reigned supreme, one portrait shattered the mirror. A woman, ancient and angular, glares out from the canvas with a grimace that's half smile, half snarl. Her nose is hooked, her jaw sharp, and her skin sags like parchment. Upon her head sits a ridiculously ornate horned headdress, lavish, elaborate, and entirely out of step with her gnarled features. This is the Ugly Duchess, painted around 1513 by the Flemish master Quentin Matsys, and it remains one of the most unsettling and enigmatic images ever put to panel. At first glance, the painting feels like a cruel joke, a caricature, a medieval meme mocking the ravages of time. But beneath the grotesque surface lies a haunting commentary on vanity, decay, and the desperation of clinging to youth in a world that worships beauty. Her clothing is out of date even for her time. Her dress, style, and jewelry recall a past century, hinting at a woman trapped in nostalgia. clinging to a version of herself that no longer exists. She holds a red rose between clawed fingers, not in bloom but aged, its petals curling like her lips, its romance wilted. Her body is distorted, sagging breasts bound in a low-cut bodice, arms twisted and swollen, with flesh that looks more reptilian than human. It's not just old age being portrayed, it's transformation, as though she is somewhere between a woman and a witch, or worse, becoming something altogether non-human. Many believe Matses may have drawn inspiration from those suffering from Paget's disease, a condition unknown at the time that causes the bones to enlarge and deform. But diagnosis alone cannot explain the power of this portrait. Her expression is key. There is pride in it, a twisted dignity. She does not avert her eyes. In fact, she seems almost amused, as if she's in on the joke, as if she knows that society finds her hideous, and yet she dares to flaunt her grotesquerie anyway. Some scholars believe the painting was a satirical response to Leonardo da Vinci's idealized sketches of female beauty. Matses, like many Northern Renaissance artists, had little interest in flattery. He preferred truth, even if that truth made the viewer uncomfortable. And the ugly Duchess is nothing if not uncomfortable. So much so that centuries later, her image would find new life as the visual inspiration for John Tenniel's iconic illustrations of the Duchess in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. There she would become a figure of absurdity, madness and menace, screaming at children, hurling insults and stirring chaos at tea parties. But long before Lewis Carroll dreamed of Wonderland, Matses had already painted a woman who existed outside of time, a grotesque reflection of society's fears about aging, womanhood, and the loss of beauty. But this painting is more than just a warning or a satire. It is, in its own twisted way, a kind of liberation. In a world obsessed with perfection, the Ugly Duchess reminds us that truth is often more powerful than idealism, and that beauty, when stripped of its illusions, reveals something far more human. In the sacred stillness of 15th century France, where divine order was expressed through gilded halos and perfect symmetry, one work dared to bend the boundary between heaven and earth, the sacred and the disturbingly surreal. The Melun diptych, painted by Jean Fouquet around 1452, is a two-panel masterpiece that feels torn from the veil between dream and nightmare. Commissioned as a funerary piece by Etienne Chevalier, treasurer to King Charles VII, it is meant to honor the dead. But it does much more than that. It unsettles the soul. On the left panel, Chevalier kneels beside his patron saint, Saint Stephen. The figures are rendered in that crisp, austere realism so distinctive of early French Renaissance painting. Stephen clutches the rock of his martyrdom atop a crimson book, calm and ghostly, while Etienne prays with wide, focused eyes, perhaps not at God, but at what awaits him on the opposite panel. Because when your eyes shift to the right, the entire mood transforms. The Virgin Mary sits on a high throne, swathed in a shimmering sea of white and blue, crowned with a brilliance that seems almost mechanical in its coldness. Her flesh is pale, marble-like, nearly translucent, as if no blood flows beneath it. She is not the comforting mother of medieval piety. She is otherworldly, chilling, alien. Her breasts are exposed, yet there is no sensuality, only a symbolic bareness, cold and clinical. She is surrounded by red and blue cherubs that do not resemble children so much as eerie, winged homunculi identical in their features, their gazes fixed in unnatural serenity. They form a pulsating halo of unsettling perfection, like a divine hive mind. Most disturbingly, it is widely believed that this Virgin Mary is modeled after Agnes Sorel, the king's favorite mistress, who died mysteriously just before the diptych was painted. Her likeness, cast as the Holy Mother, sent shockwaves through religious circles. How could a woman of the court, however beautiful, be immortalized as the Virgin herself? But perhaps that was the point. This is not the Mary of Scripture. This is a Queen of Heaven recast in royal flesh, a divine symbol reimagined as political statement, erotic homage, and spiritual enigma all at once. The Melun diptych is not strange because it tries to be. It is strange because it dares to paint the divine not as a mystery hidden in light, but as something icy, unknowable, and far removed from human tenderness. It is a frozen vision of heaven, haunting, hypnotic, and impossible to forget. There are paintings that whisper, and there are paintings that scream. Study after Velázquez's portrait of Pope Innocent X does the latter, and it never stops. Painted in 1953 by the tortured genius Francis Bacon, this work is not merely a reinterpretation of Diego Velázquez's 1650 masterpiece. It is an exorcism. A violent guttural wail trapped forever in oil and canvas. In Bacon's hands, the stoic grandeur of the original Pope Innocent X is ripped apart and reborn as a grotesque hallucination. A portrait of power decaying, authority unraveling, and the human soul stripped bare. The Pope, seated on his gilded throne, is enveloped in a dark void. He is no longer the supreme figure of calm control that Velázquez depicted. Instead, Bacon presents a man mid-scream, mouth stretched open in sheer terror or agony, yet his hands remain eerily still, resting on the arms of the chair like some ghostly marionette. This tension between emotional chaos and physical paralysis is what makes the painting so disturbing. It's as if we're watching a nightmare frozen at its most intense moment, the climax of horror held forever in place. The brushwork is violent, the face is deformed, not in the way of caricature, but like a soul being distorted by invisible torment. Translucent vertical lines run down the image, like a veil or prison bars, further trapping the figure in a purgatory of soundless suffering. The purple robes shimmer with cold majesty, but they offer no comfort. In fact, they feel suffocating, wrapping the Pope in the trappings of power that now seem more like chains. And the scream. The scream. It's silent, of course, but somehow you hear it. Bacon was heavily influenced by the ghostly cries in Eisenstein's battleship Potemkin, specifically the image of a nurse screaming with her glasses shattered, blood streaming from her eye. That same primal terror pulses through this Pope's gaping mouth. It is not a scream of violence done to others, but a scream of violence done to the self, an existential scream, a scream of knowing that God may not be listening. Francis Bacon would return to this screaming Pope motif again and again, haunted by it like a man chasing a recurring nightmare he could never quite outrun. But this 1953 version remains the most haunting, because it stares back at us and reminds us that beneath every symbol of power lies a very human terror, the fear that we are utterly alone, screaming into the void. There are images that disturb the mind, and then there are those that claw straight into the soul. Saturn devouring his son is not merely a painting, it is a descent into madness, a howl of terror from the deepest corners of the human psyche. Created by Francisco Goya in the final years of his life, this monstrous vision wasn't meant for galleries or public eyes. It was painted directly onto the walls of his home, his sanctuary turned into a prison of despair. This was not art for admiration, it was a cry for help. What we see is a god gone mad. Saturn, Cronus in Greek mythology, has been prophesied that one of his children will overthrow him. In a desperate bid to cheat fate, he begins to devour them one by one. But Goya's Saturn is no dignified figure of ancient myth. He is primal, skeletal, insane. His eyes bulge with animal panic, wide and unblinking, as if caught in the middle of some frenzied nightmare. His mouth is gaping, stretched grotesquely as he tears into the limp, mutilated body of his child. Blood splashes across the canvas, the child's head already gone, devoured. There is no background, no throne, no celestial sky, just darkness, blackness, oblivion. The god has become a beast, and in doing so, he drags us down with him. The figure is emaciated, his body a twisted silhouette against the void, illuminated by a ghostly, unearthly light that only adds to the dread. His hands clutch the corpse like a starving animal, more instinct than intent. The violence is not just physical, it's psychological. It tears at the very concept of parenthood, of protection, of trust. A father consuming his own child, a creator destroying his creation. But beneath this myth, something even more terrifying pulses. Goya's own unraveling mind. This was painted between 1819 and 1823, after he had survived illness, deafness, war, and the collapse of reason in Spain. The black paintings, as these final works became known, were never titled or explained by Goya himself. We don't know what exactly drove him to render such visceral terror on his walls, but perhaps this was his prophecy, his understanding that power, whether divine or political, always ends in destruction. That time devours all. That madness, once unleashed, cannot be contained. Saturn, Devouring his son isn't a painting you look at, it's a painting that stares back, that shrieks from the dark, that reminds us that within every legend lies something terrifyingly human, and within every human, something terrifyingly monstrous. Imagine stepping into a dimly lit room, where the air seems thick with tension. In the midst of the shadows, a single painting demands your attention, its violent drama almost leaping off the canvas. This is Medusa, painted by the Italian artist Caravaggio in 1597. At first glance, it's a grotesque and disturbing image, yet it's hauntingly beautiful in its raw emotion and shocking realism. But what makes this painting truly strange isn't just the gruesome portrayal of Medusa herself. It's the story, the symbolism, and the perfect blend of horror and art that makes it a masterpiece like no other. Medusa, a figure from Greek mythology, was once a beautiful maiden cursed by the goddess Athena. Medusa's transformation into a monster, with snakes for hair and a gaze that could turn anyone to stone, is an iconic tale of tragedy and vengeance. Caravaggio, in his inimitable style, captures not just the visual terror of Medusa, but also the raw emotion of her moment of despair and rage. Medusa's face is twisted in a final, horrifying expression, her wide eyes locked in fear, mouth agape in what seems like a scream, or perhaps a silent plea. You can almost feel the pulse of tension in the room as the snakes writhe on her head, their venomous bodies weaving through her hair, some even snaking toward the viewer, as if to strike. What makes this painting even more unsettling is that Caravaggio didn't choose to depict Medusa as a monstrous figure from mythology, distant and untouchable. Instead, he painted her as a very human woman, her agony painted with such precision that it feels like we are witnessing her final moments. Her face is shockingly lifelike, the texture of her skin almost tangible, the play of light and shadow adding depth to the emotional horror. Her hair, crafted with such detail, seems alive, as if the snakes themselves might leap from the canvas at any moment. But there's something more to this than just a portrayal of myth. Caravaggio was known for his ability to capture the human experience in its most raw and unflinching form. In Medusa, he doesn't just present the monster, but the girl who was cursed. The expression on her face, fear, pain, and regret, speaks to a story that goes beyond the mythological. It becomes a meditation on the fragility of beauty, the consequences of anger, and the ever-present specter of death. Medusa's transformation is not just physical, it's symbolic. She is the victim of divine wrath, a cautionary tale about beauty and power and the dangers of tempting the gods. It's also worth noting that this particular painting was not merely a depiction of a mythological subject. It was, in fact, created for the shield of a nobleman, the Duke of Tuscany. The piece was commissioned as part of a collection of mythological works, yet Medusa stands out in its chilling intensity. It's as if Caravaggio was not just painting the face of Medusa, but also tapping into the darker, more visceral aspects of human nature. The very use of the canvas as a shield adds another layer of irony, suggesting that no matter how beautiful or powerful one may seem, there's always the lurking threat of destruction, a blow waiting to be struck. As you look closer, the unusual choice of medium adds a sense of tension and darkness that deepens the impact. The painting was not just an artistic exercise, but a weapon in itself, a shield that carried with it the same dark power that Medusa's gaze supposedly held. The strokes are intense, chaotic, and vigorous, which is a trademark of Caravaggio's work. His use of light and shadow, what art historians call chiaroscuro, creates a sharp contrast between the vivid intensity of Medusa's face and the darkness that surrounds her, emphasizing the horror of her fate. The stillness of her face, frozen in terror, only amplifies the feeling that time has stopped and her fate is sealed. As you stand before Dante and Virgil in Hell, painted by the Dutch master Hieronymus Bosch, you're immediately struck by the sheer complexity and chaos of the scene. The swirling, tumultuous landscape stretches out before you, a nightmarish vision that seems to defy the laws of nature and logic. It's a place where reality bends and writhes, where the boundaries between the human and the infernal are blurred beyond recognition. There's no gentle transition here, just raw, unfiltered madness. The figures of Dante and Virgil stand in the foreground, mere specks in a hellish expanse that seems to stretch on infinitely. Yet their presence seems almost trivial in comparison to the overwhelming and visceral chaos that surrounds them. The painting is inspired by Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, specifically the part of the epic where Dante, guided by the Roman poet Virgil, descends into the underworld. Bosch, with his unparalleled imagination, brings to life this terrifying descent into hell, depicting the grotesque landscapes, monstrous beings, and unearthly punishments that Dante encounters. However, what makes this painting particularly strange isn't just the subject matter, it's the artist's ability to conjure an inferno that feels both entirely alien and somehow familiar. The shapes, the colors, the bizarre creatures, it all feels like an otherworldly dream, or rather a nightmare made flesh. In the painting, Dante and Virgil are depicted on their journey through hell, the journey that will take them through the 9 circles of the damned. But their bodies and faces seem so detached from the hellscape around them, almost as if they are ghosts themselves, part of the landscape but also removed from it. They stand almost stoically, gazing upon the endless suffering and madness, yet their expressions convey no real shock or horror, just the somber resignation of men who are witnessing the inevitable. In some ways, they appear to be more observers than participants in this nightmare. It's as if Bosch is telling us that Dante and Virgil, no matter how important their roles in the narrative, are still just figures within a far greater and far more terrifying reality. The real spectacle, however, is the landscape itself. Bosch's hell isn't a place of fire and brimstone as we might traditionally imagine, but a twisted, surreal world full of impossible creatures, grotesque machinery, and bizarre landscapes. The damned are shown suffering in ways that seem beyond comprehension. Some are being eaten by enormous monsters. Others are entangled in grotesque devices that twist their bodies in impossible contortions. The sky is filled with smoke, the ground is cracked and uneven, and the figures that populate the scene seem more like tortured souls than human beings. Their expressions range from agony to quiet acceptance, but all of them seem lost in a torment that has no end. What's most striking about Bosch's portrayal of hell is how it transcends the typical depictions of damnation. Rather than simply showing fire and brimstone, he creates a world that feels alien and incomprehensible, as if this hell is not just a punishment for sins, but an entirely different dimension altogether. The creatures themselves are particularly unnerving, strange hybrids of animals, humans, and machines, beings that seem to have emerged from Bosch's fevered imagination. One can't help but feel a sense of dread as these creatures move through the scene, their grotesque forms adding a nightmarish quality to an already unsettling landscape. It's also worth noting the intricate detail in every inch of the painting. Bosch's use of color and texture makes the scene feel almost tactile. The layers of hellish creatures seem to spill out from the canvas, each one more disturbing than the last. The very brushstrokes seem to capture the sense of motion in this chaotic world. Everything is constantly shifting, writhing, and struggling. The eyes of the damned, the twisted forms of the creatures, the mechanical and organic horrors, everything is rendered with a level of detail that makes the painting feel alive, as though the scene could, at any moment, leap off the canvas and swallow you whole. Dante and Virgil's journey through hell is not one of simple exploration. It is a journey of understanding, of witnessing the consequences of sin. But in Bosch's world, the punishment is not just a consequence of wrongdoings. It is an environment that completely warps and alters the very fabric of existence. The damned are not merely tortured by fire or by eternal darkness. They are transformed into grotesque, otherworldly forms, their very essence twisted beyond recognition. There's a sense that hell, as Bosch paints it, is a place that changes everything, even the laws of nature. Time, space, and form are all distorted, and in this world, nothing makes sense. Yet in this chaos, Bosch also captures something deeply human, the inevitable sense of helplessness in the face of overwhelming evil. Dante and Virgil, despite their knowledge, despite their roles as guides and scholars, are still powerless in this vast, unknowable hellscape. They are not saviors, they are simply witnesses, forced to observe the consequences of human folly. Bosch's painting presents hell not just as a place of punishment, but as a reflection of the worst of humanity, our greed, our vices, our capacity for cruelty. In this depiction, hell is not just a place, it is a reflection of human nature itself, distorted, exaggerated, and magnified to nightmarish proportions. There's something deeply unsettling about the way Bosch portrays the damned in this painting. Their faces are contorted in eternal pain, their bodies trapped in bizarre, torturous positions. But what is most unsettling is the fact that, unlike other depictions of hell, there's no sense of finality in their torment. The damned are not simply suffering, they are trapped in an endless loop of suffering, their fates sealed forever. There is no escape, no redemption, only a cycle of pain that repeats without end. When you step back and take in the full scope of Dante and Virgil in Hell, what becomes clear is that it is not just a representation of hell, but a meditation on the nature of human suffering, sin, and the fragility of existence. Bosch's vision is not just about fire and brimstone, it's about the collapse of order, the breakdown of human morality, and the horrors that await in the afterlife. It is a warning, a reflection, and an invitation to explore the depths of the human soul, all wrapped up in one terrifyingly strange and captivating painting. In the end, Dante and Virgil in Hell is a masterpiece of both art and imagination. It is strange not just because of its subject matter, but because of its ability to make the viewer confront the raw, unsettling truths about human existence. It doesn't just depict hell, it forces you to feel its presence, to step into the nightmarish reality Bosch has created, and to witness the horrors of damnation not as a distant, abstract idea, but as a terrifyingly real, tangible experience. In the twisted, bizarre world that Bosch paints, there are no easy answers, no comforting resolutions. There is only the endless, eternal torment of the damned, and the cold, indifferent gaze of the two men who must witness it all. In the world of art, some paintings seem so simple at first glance, yet hide within them profound depths of symbolism, history, and meaning. The Vegetable Garden by the renowned Spanish artist Giuseppe Arcimboldo is one of these deceptively intricate works. At first it may seem like a straightforward portrayal of vegetables, a lush, almost serene garden in full bloom. But as your eyes wander over the canvas, you begin to notice that all is not as it seems. The vegetables, fruits, and plants are carefully arranged not just to show the natural beauty of the harvest, but to form something far stranger: a human face, a mind-bending, surreal reflection of the human condition and its connection to nature. Arcimboldo, a master of the Mannerist style, was known for his unusual imaginative portraits, but the Vegetable Garden stands apart in how it pushes the boundaries of perception. Instead of merely presenting a traditional still life, Arcimboldo builds the image of a man's face out of an assortment of vegetables, fruits, and greenery. The face is composed not of typical features, but of cabbages, carrots, lettuces, and even flowers. The garden itself is no longer just a garden. It has become the very essence of a person's identity. At the heart of it, the painter seems to be asking, how intertwined are we with the world around us? How much do we see ourselves reflected in nature's bounty? And is the distinction between the human form and the natural world as clear-cut as we think? The face that emerges from the vegetables is unmistakably human, yet at the same time, it is entirely alien, an unsettling hybrid of man and plant. The vegetables aren't just randomly thrown together. They're meticulously arranged to capture the delicate balance between nature and humanity. The cauliflower forms the chin, the aubergine creates the eyes, and the squashes and cucumbers twist into the lips and ears. The colors are rich and vibrant, with the earthy tones of the vegetables grounding the face in the soil, creating a sense that the figure is part of the very garden that surrounds him. What's particularly strange about this painting is the way Arcimboldo manipulates your sense of scale and perspective. At first glance, you might not even notice the face. But as you take a moment to study the composition, the face emerges slowly, like a riddle to be solved. The fusion of the human form with the vegetable world is so seamless that it forces you to reconsider the boundaries between the living and the organic. You begin to wonder, are the vegetables simply being used as mere tools for artistic expression, or is there a deeper meaning, a commentary on humanity's connection to nature? Are we in fact just an extension of the earth itself, our bodies, our faces, shaped by the environment around us? Arcimboldo's genius lies in his ability to make something as ordinary as a vegetable seem extraordinary. The textures of the vegetables are rendered with such precision that you can almost feel the roughness of a potato's skin or the crispness of a leaf of lettuce. Yet, instead of celebrating the individual beauty of the plants, Arcimboldo twists them into something that both fascinates and disturbs. The fact that the vegetables are not merely presented as isolated objects, but as part of a greater whole, a human face, forces you to confront the idea that we are inseparable from the world we inhabit. It's a subtle yet powerful reflection on how we, as humans, are inextricably linked to the natural world. But there's something more at play here, something darker lurking beneath the vibrant layers of fruit and vegetable. Arcimboldo, with his characteristic wit and playful subversion of reality, is not simply offering a visual feast. He's inviting you into a world of visual paradoxes where nothing is as it seems. The face itself, though clearly human, becomes unsettling because of its unnatural composition. What would normally be considered beautiful, the human face, is transformed into something grotesque, strange, and unfamiliar. The vegetables, in turn, cease to be just food. They become part of a larger, more unsettling commentary on how human identity and nature are not always as harmonious as we like to believe. Beyond the aesthetic playfulness, the painting also serves as a meditation on the cycles of nature. The idea of the face as a garden is not just about the blending of organic forms, but about how life itself is cyclical. The garden produces and regenerates, just as the face reflects the passage of time. The vegetables, once harvested, will soon be replaced by new life, just as human faces grow and change as time passes. Yet while the natural world moves in cycles, the unsettling human face in the painting seems to exist outside of time, forever fixed in a moment of equilibrium, neither living nor dead, but always in a state of metamorphosis. In the end, the vegetable garden is not just a still life, nor simply a portrait of a human figure. It is a complex, thought-provoking exploration of life, nature, and the ever-present, often uncomfortable connection between them. Arcimboldo invites you into a world where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, where the natural world reveals itself as both beautiful and unnervingly strange. It's a painting that lingers in your mind, making you reconsider not just the world around you, but your very place within it. Gabrielle d'Estrées and One of Her Sisters is a painting that is as enigmatic as it is provocative, and its story is as much about power and desire as it is about the complexity of gender and relationships. The work, attributed to the French school of the late 16th century, remains shrouded in mystery, particularly because of its composition and the implicit narrative hidden within it. This iconic piece, often thought to depict Gabrielle d'Estrées, the mistress of King Henry IV of France with one of her sisters, radiates both sensuality and intrigue. But beyond the apparent intimacy, the painting is a silent observer of the political and social landscape of its time, teeming with layers of personal and public affairs that are as bold as they are hidden beneath the surface. The painting itself captures a moment between two women, Gabrielle d'Estrées, who is the more prominent figure, and her sister, the unnamed woman, who is only vaguely identifiable. They are seated in what appears to be a luxurious, almost dreamlike space, surrounded by sumptuous fabrics and the suggestion of wealth and power. Gabrielle, with her pale skin, red lips, and delicate features, is the central focus, and her gaze, calm yet filled with a certain challenge, commands attention. But it is the gesture of her sister, who holds a ring in her hand, that tells a far deeper, more intimate story. The sister is seen placing the ring onto Gabrielle's finger, an act that hints at an unspoken connection, not just between the two women, but also between Gabrielle and the power structures of the court. The ring, a symbol of wealth, ownership, and perhaps even a secret relationship, invites the viewer into a world where symbolism dances between the lines of personal affection and political power. What makes this painting particularly striking is the strange, almost conspiratorial nature of the scene. Gabrielle's sister, though clearly a part of the composition, is somewhat overshadowed by Gabrielle herself, who becomes both the object of desire and the center of the scene. Her exposed breast, which seems to offer itself openly to the viewer, carries with it a silent challenge, a reminder of Gabrielle's power over the men of the court, but also of the ways in which women of her status had to use their bodies to navigate a world built upon patriarchy. The exposure of her breast is not simply sexual. It is a calculated move, a visual tool to communicate her worth, her dominance, and her defiance of the norms that women of her time were expected to follow. It is a symbol of the power that Gabrielle held over Henry IV, who was deeply enamored with her and showered her with wealth and status. But even as Gabrielle d'Estrées seems to be fully in control of her own narrative in this painting, there is an undeniable tension between the two sisters. Their connection is ambiguous, open to interpretation. Is the sister merely assisting in the gesture, or is she also a part of a larger, perhaps more dangerous political game? Are they co-conspirators in the manipulation of power, or is the moment one of tender familial affection? Some scholars have speculated that the painting's symbolic elements, particularly the ring, suggest a relationship far more complex than a simple familial bond. The ring could be an allegory for the way women were often used as political pawns during the time, yet also a symbol of the control they held over their own lives and bodies in a world that sought to define them. And then there is the overarching presence of King Henry IV himself. Although he is absent from the canvas, his influence looms large. Gabrielle d'Estrées, after all, was his mistress for several years and bore him several children, all while still maintaining her own distinct position in the court. The painting, whether intentionally or not, seems to suggest the unspoken, untold aspects of their relationship. There is a subtle play of voyeurism at work, as if we are privy to a hidden scene, an intimate moment in the life of someone whose personal relationships were, in fact, shaped by the public's gaze. This duality of private and public life is further emphasized by the highly stylized depiction of the two women. The luxuriously draped fabrics, the richness of their clothing, and the opulent surroundings all suggest a world of excess and power, a court in which appearances were everything. And yet, in the midst of this grandiosity, there is the quiet act of bonding between two sisters, perhaps making a pact of their own in this world of power and manipulation. The meaning of Gabrielle d'Estrées and one of her sisters is open to interpretation, and that is part of its intrigue. The ambiguity in the painting, of the connection between the sisters, the symbolism of the ring, the placement of the exposed breast, creates a narrative that's rich in drama, yet refuses to offer easy answers. It challenges the viewer to consider the roles of women in the courts of history, their manipulation of their own image, their subtle forms of power, and the ways in which they navigated the complex webs of affection, authority, and desire. Ultimately, this work speaks to a larger truth, that in a time when women were often relegated to the background, their personal lives, passions, and political machinations were not only intertwined with the lives of powerful men, but also profoundly shaped the very nature of power itself. Gabrielle d'Estrées, despite her beauty and her role as mistress to Henry IV, was much more than a passive object of affection. She was an active participant in the delicate dance of courtly life, and in this painting, her power, sexuality, and agency are unmistakably on display. And as for her sister, while she may have been overshadowed in history, her role in this intimate moment is a reminder that history is often written in shades of grey, where family bonds and power dynamics collide in a world full of unspoken stories.